One of the deepest motives on the part of the left to suppress conservative voices is because of the fear of being ridiculed, the fear of being exposed. Many of these characters on the left, these pipsqueaks in power, are ridiculous figures. And the truth of it is they kind of know it. You can pick it up if you watch The Signal. So consider, for example, Kamala Harris, and that irritating cackle. The point of that is, I know I'm a fraud. And you know I'm a fraud. But let's both pretend that I'm not a fraud. But what Kamala Harris fears is people who can see through the charade and actually factually expose her fraudulence, her basic dishonesty of character. I'm not just talking about the fact she made a gaffe, she made a mistake. I'm talking about her distortion of basically who she is. So let's start with Kamala Harris's self-portrait. And this is from a recent interview that she did with Elle magazine. She basically told a story that she's been apparently telling for years. She's been telling it in her book. She's been telling it in various interviews. And here we have a clip of Kamala Harris telling this very same story to Jimmy Fallon.
Get that energy from your parents, or the thought of, hey, I have to fight for what's right, and I got to get out there. And I mean, when were you out there protesting?
Well, I was in a stroller. And so I was out there. And in fact, my mother used to have a very funny story about I was fussing and she said, Kamala, what do you want? And I said, and this is how she would say it. And she said, Kamala, what do you want? And I said, freedom.
No.
So there it is, the story, the trademark cackle. Jimmy Fallon playing along. Oh, he can't believe it. What a story. This is the game of frauds. Because two internet sleuths, Freddie Engels and a guy named Andre Domise, recognized the story. They go, we've heard this before. As it turns out, the story is plagiarized. It never happened to Kamala Harris. It's actually a story told by Martin Luther King. In a 1965 interview in Playboy, Martin Luther King told the story this way. I'm now going to quote Martin Luther King. I will never forget a moment in Birmingham when a white policeman accosted a little Negro girl, 7 or 8 years old, who was walking in a demonstration with her mother. What do you want? The policeman asked her gruffly, and the little girl looked at him straight in the eye and answered, feed 'em, feed 'em. Now, some of the fact-checking sites, and here I want to show how the fact-checking sites are sort of in on it. They put on their thick glasses, or we're going to scrutinize the truth of this story. And they basically go, it's partly true. It's partly true. Really? Let's look at what they mean by that. I'm now quoting from Snopes. They admit that the story is right there in the King interview. But they then say this. We are unable to determine that Harris, who heard the account from her now deceased mother, deliberately plagiarized it from King. In other words, it could be true. The mother's dead, so we have no way to know for sure. After all, we'd like to call the mother, and see if she'll admit it, she made it up. So this is how they cover up. They know that Kamala Harris made the story up. She lifted it right from King. But they are trying to cover for her. Now, let's ask the serious question. Is it possible that Kamala Harris is, in fact, the little girl in King's story? Could it be that he was referring to her? The answer, it turns out, is no. That's impossible. Why? First of all, King is being interviewed in 1965. He's talking about events that occurred earlier in Birmingham. And he's talking about a little girl who was 7 to 8 years old, obviously someone born in the 50s. When was Kamala Harris born? October of 1964. So the simple fact of the matter is she could not possibly be the girl in the story. So this is a made-up story, which raises the very interesting question, why would she make it up? And the answer is pretty obvious. She's making it up because she needs an artificial history, a fabricated history, to compensate for her real history. Here's Kamala Harris's real history. She is descended in a straight line from one of, if not the largest slave owner in Jamaica, a man named Donald Harris. Her father, Donald Harris, wrote an article in a Jamaican magazine saying that he, and therefore Kamala, are descended in a straight line from a large Jamaican slave owner, a man named Hamilton Brown, who owned 5 plantations and well over 100 slaves. So that's Kamala's real history. She's descended not from slaves, or not merely from slaves, but from slave owners. She doesn't want to admit this, of course, and she never has admitted it. And when I disclosed it, providing genealogical records and so on, it's really funny, but all the sort of liberal pundits like Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's, by the way, the author of the so-called New York Times 1619 Project, and Nicole Hannah-Jones jumps in and tweets, Dinesh, you got self-owned because, don't you know about rape on the plantation? The implication here, of course, is that, yeah, Kamala Harris may be descended from a slave owner, but he obviously raped some slave on the plantation, and that's Kamala's real history. The only problem with this is that Nicole Hannah-Jones was too lazy to look at the genealogical chart where she would see very clearly that this had nothing to do with plantation rape. The son of the slave owner, Hamilton Brown, who was also named Hamilton Brown, married a free colored woman named Jessie Ann Prince. The two of them had a daughter named Christiana Brown, and that's the lineage of Kamala Harris. So in other words, this had nothing to do with plantation shenanigans or rape. So Nicole Hannah-Jones then recognized, oh, Dinesh is right, but instead of admitting it, she's not going to admit it, she just deletes her tweet, erasing it, if you will, from history. Bottom line, what's going on here? Why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because we live in an age of identity politics. And in identity politics, particularly on the left, it's really important for Kamala Harris to align herself with the party of victims, with a kind of history of victimology. But she has no such history. She's descended from the planter, not the field hand. And so what she does is she drops the real history and lifts the Martin Luther King story to give her an invented history, knowing that this will not get mainstream scrutiny, that her own side will play along with this. After all, to some degree, even she is a pawn of their agenda. But this is the kind of entrenched dishonesty. And notice who's involved here. Jimmy Fallon's involved, Kamala Harris is involved, Nicole Hannah-Jones is involved, Snopes is involved. It's a collaboration of fundamentally dishonest people all coming together to put out a bogus narrative.